Hey everyone, I am Gary of the Elysiums. Welcome to a newest video. This is my ranking of Bad Company's studio albums. So if you haven't already, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, like this video. You can even share it if you'd like, I'd appreciate that. Helps support my channel and gives me motivation to make more videos such as this one. So Bad Company was formed in the early 70s, sort of a super group. Basically, we have singer Paul Rogers and drummer Simon Kirk coming from the band Free, Mick Ralphs coming from Mott the Hoople, and then Boz Burrell coming from King Crimson. And together, they, in my opinion, recorded one of the greatest debut studio albums of all time. Throughout their career, they've released 12 studio albums. They've had 3 different singers, and they remain a staple on classic rock radio, a huge influence in the hard rock community and rock and roll community. And unfortunately, about a month ago, we lost guitarist Mick Ralphs, so he is no longer around. The band has continued on as of recently, not releasing any studio albums, but doing live shows with Paul Rogers back in the band singing. And, they're still, Paul Rogers hasn't missed a step. The guy's in his late 70s and his voice is amazing. So yeah, they're actually not really selling out arenas, but they're selling out like kind of concert venues, smaller concert venues like casino places around stuff like that. I know Atlantic City, they'll sell out there, and just a really good band that needs to be recognized for their contribution to music. So yeah, we're gonna get right into it. So I misplaced one of the albums. We're gonna get right into it with their final album and the 12th album they released, and coming in number 12 for me. This is Stories Told and Untold. So basically, this was a re-recording of a lot of older songs, but they did it in a different way. It's like country tinged, almost like Americana sounding. It's not good. Featuring vocalist Robert Hart, not to be confused with Robbie Hart from The Wedding Singer. Robert Hart on vocals. He is now, who is he performing with? He's actually performing with the band now. Man from Man's Earth Band. He's actually the lead vocalist of it currently. But this album is really not something that I ever really throw on. The hits Ready for Love, Can't Get Enough, and Shooting Star are on here. But like I said, they're reworked, and it's not Paul Rogers on vocals, so really an album that falls short. And, I think the band knew it because this was released in 1996, and it turns out to be their last ever studio album. They have released multiple compilations and live recordings since then, but this was the last studio album we ever got from Bad Company from 1996. All right, coming in number 11 from 1990. This is Holy Water. It's not the best album in my opinion. Features Brian Howe on vocals, replacing obviously Paul Rogers. With this album, I feel like the band tried to go a different direction. In my opinion, they did survive the 80s. They didn't have the popularity that they did in the 70s with Paul Rogers, but with this album, it's more of like they moved towards like AOR and kind of got rid of the hard rock, in my opinion. Once in a while I'll throw it on, but then it gets a little boring for me. So that's why it comes in number 11. It's more listenable than Stories Told and Untold, in my opinion, but nothing exciting on this album. All right, coming up next, from 1992, this is actually the last album performed with Brian Howe on vocals. This is Here Comes Trouble. In my opinion, not the worst album, but again, it's that 80s. I feel like they took the route of 80s rockers, 70s to 80s, the rockers that go in the 90s, like almost like a Rod Stewart sound. Like there's not much here. The title track actually did get some play on like classic rock radio back in the day, but they don't play it anymore. Stranger Than Fiction was the single released from this album. Very, very poor poor single in my opinion. There's the track listing. No, again, nothing too exciting on here. Overall, it's not the worst album. It is listenable, but like I said, don't expect Bad Company from what we know from Bad Company. It's a different sound in my opinion. All right, and coming in at number 9, Fame and Fortune. Okay, this is another album featuring Brian Howe on vocals, produced by Mick Jones from Foreigner. I like this album. To me, it has more of a 80s, I don't want to say hair metal, but more of an 80s, it's influenced by the hair metal sound, even Aerosmith's comeback, but this was actually 1986, so this was before. So this is the first album released with Brian Howe on vocals, replacing the great Paul Rodgers. Some of the great songs on here are Burning Up, a good song, Fame and Fortune, Valerie's a good track on here. Yeah, so it's like I said, it's definitely got that sound of the 70s band reinventing themselves through the 80s. Obviously, this is a band that helped inspire a lot of the bands that came out in the 80s from their 70s output, and to me, this is not a bad album whatsoever. Album cover, they could have done much better. Album cover is a little boring, but it is what it is. All right, we are now at number 8, Rough Diamonds from 1982. So this would be the final studio album to feature Paul Rodgers on vocals. And in my opinion, this album falls very short compared to everything else they did with Paul Rodgers. There you see the Swan Song. They were signed to Swan Song, which was Led Zeppelin's label. So a lot of the controversy behind this album is there wasn't much money behind it. It's produced by the band themselves. There's the track listing, and at the time their manager Peter Grant, who was the same Peter Grant that managed Led Zeppelin, was dealing with the death of John Bonham, so he wasn't involved in this album whatsoever. So this is just like the sound of a band falling apart. Electric Land was the single released from this album, and it wasn't really a decent song at all. I don't know what they were trying to do in this album. Again, it's not hard rock whatsoever, in my opinion. It's more like, it's definitely AOR. It's, you know, there's synth on it, there's piano on it. It sounds more of like, you know, nothing against Foreigner. Foreigner is a great band, obviously, but it's something closer to like what Foreigner was doing with the more of like, you know, I want to know what love is, piano, and all that stuff, but obviously not as good as the vocals or the songwriting. So yeah, last album they would do with Paul Rodgers, and like I said, the band just kind of, it's the sound of a band falling apart. Coming in at number 7, Dangerous H. This is my favorite album of the Brian Howe era. This was his sophomore album, released in 1988. I think the cover's kind of cool there, but I feel like I get a little inspiration from 1984 by Van Halen with the Angels Smoking. This to me is their, you know, hair metal album. It's heavier. It's definitely rocking. One Night's a great song. Shake It Up. No Smoke Without a Fire. In my opinion, this is an album, you know, you definitely can listen to all the way through. Great album. Love Attack, Excited, Rock of America, Dirty Boy. Like I said, my favorite from the Brian Howe era, and I think they did a really good album with this. Really, really good. So yeah, check this out if you want to check out a different vocalist rather than Paul Rodgers, or you're not familiar with Bad Company without Paul Rodgers. Definitely check this out. Brian Howe on vocals, and does a very decent job. Coming in at number 6, this could be a little controversial. Company of Strangers, the first album they would do with Robert Hart. I really like this album. I think it's great. The title track is awesome. Little Martha, cool little track in there. Judas My Brother, Clearwater Highway, Abandoned and Alone, Pretty Woman. It's just Loving You Out Loud, Dance with the Devil. I just feel like this is a very strong album, and I like it a lot, especially coming out in 1995. Obviously the band unfortunately didn't have any hits because 1995 was that was the peak of alternative metal, or not, excuse me, alternative rock, not alternative metal. Alternative rock, we just lost Kurt Cobain, so we have post-grunge now around. Grunge is kind of dying down. Radio stations didn't care for this. MTV didn't care for this. The album cover is very weak. I don't know, what is that, like a towel or something? But overall, I think it's a really good album. Again, if you want to check out Bad Company without Paul Rodgers, this is another album to go to. So you want to check out Brian Howe, you want to go with Dangerous Age, you want to check out Robert Hart, not to be confused with Robbie Hart. Check out Company of Strangers. I like this album a lot. And for those of you wondering, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that haven't picked this out or spun this for a really long time, you're like, what the hell is he talking about? Go give it another listen. It's a decent album. But remember, don't go into it thinking that you're going to get Bad Company's debut or you're going to get Paul Rodgers or Bad Company at their peak. You got to go into it with a different mindset of, hey, this is a new band. It's Bad Company only in name, so try it out. All right, and coming at number 5 is Burning Sky. Those of you that are familiar with the movie Almost Famous, this cover could look a little suspicious to you. Might remind you of something. The Stillwater t-shirt. So yeah, at this time, Paul Rodgers, he's very egotistical. He was in all the magazines. He was getting, pushed as one of the greatest vocalists of the time. So, he thought he was a little bigger in the band, but, Mick Rouse and him were butting heads. But remember, this isn't a super group. So all these guys are very well known. Nothing huge on here, nothing great. The title track's probably the best song on the album, in my opinion. Overall, I don't hate the album. I think it's decent. It's not Rough Diamond, which is at times unlistenable. It's got the great Bad Company sound, but again, you can start to hear that the band is egos are taking hold, and they kind of want all their own say. But overall, a good album. Like I said, I ranked it as number 5. There you see the Swan Song again. All right, coming at number 4, Run With the Pack. Obviously, it features the title track, which was a big hit for the band, Run With the Pack. Live for the Music, another awesome song. It's kind of one of those like rock and roll anthems to me. Live for the Music, I love it. Simple Man's great. Love Me Somebody. Silver, Blue, and Gold. Sweet Little Sister, Fade Away. There's the track listing here. So this was actually the 3rd album released by Bad Company in 1974. So within 2 years, this band's on their 3rd album. There's a cool gatefold of the band sitting around in their house. Band's on top of the world at this point. One of the biggest rock bands out there. Like I said, they're on Swan Song along with Led Zeppelin. So, just huge band. One of the big hard rock bands at the time, helping to form what would become heavy metal. And, in the 70s, this band was considered a heavy metal band. Because remember, at that time, we had Led Zeppelin, we had Sabbath, which was obviously king when it came to heavy metal. We had Alice Cooper, Deep Purple, Ted Nugent. They were metal. Judas Priest was just about to come out at around this time, with their debut album, Rock and Rolla. And bands like Iron Maiden had not yet formed. Motorhead is about to release their albums, So yeah, that's where heavy metal was in the 70s. Coming at number 3, Desolation Angels. This is actually the second to last album they would release with Paul Rodgers. And for me, I feel like after Burning Sky, the band kind of dropped their egos a little bit and, came together and made a fantastic album. Opens up with Rock and Roll Fantasy, one of their biggest hits of all time, one of the greatest, classic rock songs of all time. Still played to this day, 1979 release. There's the album, the songs from the album. Yeah, I like this album a lot. At this time, I'm sure everyone said, hey, Bill, Bad Company's back with Rock and Roll Fantasy. That's a huge song. We haven't heard a big hit from them in quite some years. Besides that, we got Crazy Circles, Evil Wind, Take the Time, Rhythm Machine, Gone, Gone, Gone. Really, really strong album from Bad Company. And this is coming at number 3 for me. Coming at number 2 is, I just absolutely love this album cover. I thought it was, super cool. Straight Shooter from 1974. This is their sophomore release. How do you follow up such a great debut album? You release Straight Shooter, opens up with Good Lovin' Gone Bad. In my opinion, I think it might have been a minor hit for the band, but in my opinion, it should have been much, much better. Feel Like Making Love, awesome. Love that riff on the chorus. Such a great song. Again, one of their biggest hits of all time. Weep No More. Shooting Star is on here. Such a great biographical track. And for anyone that, inspired to be a musician and, hopefully are still alive, or, tells the story of so many, tragic deaths of musicians. Deal with the Preacher, Wildfire Woman, Anna, Calling Me. Very strong album. There's all the songs, even though I just mentioned them. Like I said, Straight Shooter. I'm not sure what the numbers on the dice, if they mean anything. 6 and 5. I'm not a gambler. I don't, I know how to play all the blackjack and craps and poker and all that, but I'm not a gambler, so I don't know if that means anything, the 5 and the 6. And if it does, maybe I should know. And coming at number 1, obviously, I already mentioned a couple times, the debut album, released in 1973. One of the greatest debut albums of all time. I mean, it might as well just be a greatest hits album. Opens up with, you already know all these hits. Opens up with Can't Get Enough and the Rocksteady, Ready for Love, Don't Let Me Down, the title track, Bad Company, which is just amazing. It's one of the greatest anthems ever. The Way I Choose, Moving On, and then ends with Seagull. Yeah, these guys got together as a super group, and, obviously, Free was amazing. Free's discography is great. There's all the guys there. Awesome album. Free had a huge hit, All Right Now. This would follow up 3 years later. Mott the Hoople was huge at the time. Mick Rouse leaves Mott the Hoople to form this band. Paul Rodgers bringing Simon Kirke on drums, and then the addition of Boz Burrell, the bass player from King Crimson. He also, sang vocals with King Crimson. Awesome album. This is up there for me with so I put the greatest debut albums as they never did better. So I put this up there with the Cars debut album, Boston's debut album. I feel like those 3 are probably some of the greatest debuts of all time. But I also have other great debuts by obviously Black Sabbath's debut is one of the greatest of all time. But Black Sabbath released Paranoid, they released Master Reality, so obviously there's other albums that could rival Black Sabbath to be better. For me, no album comes better from Bad Company than this. This is a fantastic album. 5-star album, flawless. Produced by the band themselves, Peter Grant as a manager, newly signed to Swan Song, Led Zeppelin's label. Just knowing that you're being managed by the great Peter Grant and you're on Led Zeppelin's label, you're already going to shoot to the stratosphere, I feel, at that time. 1973, Led Zeppelin's on top of the world. That's when the song Remains the Same album was recorded, along with the video. They're playing Madison Square Garden. House of the Holy is released after 4 amazing albums. So yeah, Bad Company, number 1. But like I said, they didn't just become as popular as they are from being on, Swan Song and being managed by Peter Grant. The songs speak for themselves, and this is just a stone cold classic, one of the greatest albums of all time. All right, everyone, with that being said, that is my ranking of Bad Company studio albums. Drop in the comments what you think, what's your ranking, and I feel like this is going to be controversial. Company of Strangers ranking as high as I did, but like I said, I really do like this album. Go check it out. Go check this out, even if you're not familiar with Bad Company. You're a fan of 80s metal, you're a fan of hair metal, check this out. Tell me what you think. All right, everyone, that's it for this video. I'm going to thank everyone for watching, and I'll check you next time.